Today, I will be presenting on the ethical decision making process I have undergone to resolve an ethical dilemma arising in practice with a client. Drawing on the ethical decision making model outlined by Kuchar and Keith-Spiegel, I will identify the ethical dilemma and any relevant principles and standards in the APS Code of Ethics. I will reflect on my personal values that could affect my decision and identify the rights and vulnerabilities of my client. I will then identify two possible courses of action to resolve the ethical dilemma and outline possible consequences of these. Finally, I will outline my decision about the course of action I will take. The ethical dilemma I face is whether or not I terminate the therapeutic relationship with my client because either option has the potential to cause harm to my client. I am concerned that terminating therapy could mean my client does not receive the therapeutic support they need, therefore causing harm. On the other hand, continuing therapy with them could also cause harm in the long term if they miss out on potential therapeutic benefits. Two codes within the APS Code of Ethics, which are particularly relevant to this ethical dilemma, come under the general principle of propriety. Propriety is focused on ensuring that psychologists are competent in delivering the services we provide, that these services are beneficial to our clients, and that we do not cause harm through our actions and decisions. According to the ethical standard B11, it is unethical to continue providing psychological services to a client when it is reasonably clear that the client is not benefiting from these services. Code B3 similarly identifies that it is unethical to provide services for longer than is necessary for the client. Considering these, the ethical course of action to take in my situation would seem to be to terminate therapy due to the lack of progress. However, it is important to question what is considered reasonably clear and necessary to the client, especially considering that my client finds our sessions helpful. Furthermore, as outlined in the ethical standard B3, psychologists also have an ethical obligation to think about the possible consequences of our actions. As ethical psychologists, we need to take steps to try to prevent harm resulting from our decisions. So while the APS Code of Ethics provides some guidance, considering the complexity of this ethical dilemma, it does not provide a clear and conclusive answer on which is the most ethical course of action for me currently. Reflecting on what is important to me as an individual, I can identify several values and beliefs of mine that could affect my ability to make a clear decision around this ethical dilemma. One of my core values is the achievement of social justice and equity for marginalised groups. I am very aware that many gender diverse people experience discrimination, and I almost want to protect my client from this within therapeutic encounters. Underneath this value is an assumption that I can practice in a way that respects my client's gender identity more than other therapists. I also value individual autonomy to make decisions about what is best for them. Therefore, I would feel uncomfortable making a decision that my client does not want for themselves. Connected to this is my desire to be liked, which could be reflective of an agreeable personality trait and an inclination towards benevolent values as outlined by Mayo. I feel uncomfortable having difficult conversations that I know could lead to people being upset and angry, and therefore can be reluctant to have such conversations. Finally, I scored 1 on the Young Schema for Unrelenting Standards, indicating a slight tendency towards perfectionism. Looking at the work of Zhang and colleagues, I can recognise that I do have somewhat high expectations for myself and that I believe others expect highly of me also. Such perfectionism could impact my ethical decision making if my concerns of others' judgment on my therapeutic skills made me less likely to take action when a client is not achieving therapeutic goals. My client is particularly vulnerable to discrimination, being a gender diverse individual. Many gender diverse people experience discrimination and marginalisation in their everyday lives, including accessing mental health services, with significant impacts on their mental health and social inclusion. My client is also in a position of vulnerability to possible exploitation from me as a therapist. As my client is emotionally vulnerable and wants my continued support, I could exploit this therapeutic relationship for personal gain without concern for client well-being. They are also vulnerable to harm if their mental health were to decline due to not experiencing therapeutic gains, not receiving therapy, or possibly receiving therapy from a practitioner who is discriminatory. My client also has many rights which are guaranteed through the APS Code of Ethics under the general principle of respect for the rights and dignity of people and peoples. Clients have a right to an active ally in the therapeutic relationship against social prejudice. Under the ethical standard A1 of justice, psychologists have an ethical obligation to not act in a way that is discriminatory. Furthermore, legislation under Australia's Sex Discrimination Act 1984 specifically protects people from discrimination on the basis of gender identity. However, the Code of Ethics promotes that psychologists go beyond not discriminating to understanding the consequences of discrimination and stereotyping and supporting our clients to address any discrimination they have experienced. The ethical standard A2 of respect outlines the rights of clients to be treated with respect, both verbal and communications and actions. As a psychologist, I need to ensure that I am not behaving in a way that could be seen as coercive. This means I need to be very careful to respect my clients' right to autonomy over their own lives and their right to participate in decisions that affect them. Clients of psychologists also have a right to informed consent. This includes clearly communicating about the foreseeable risks of psychological services provided, such as the possibility that people do not see improvements in their presenting concerns. Clients also have a right to understand the situations under which it may be necessary to terminate, such as when it's clear that they are not benefiting from therapy. As a therapist, my primary vulnerability is that any perceived or actual conduct that is not in line with the APS Code of Ethics could lead to a complaint with serious professional implications. For instance, if I were to terminate therapy in a way that was not careful and considered, my client could perceive possible discrimination or experience harm and make a complaint on that basis. In considering possible courses of action to resolve the ethical dilemma I face with my client, I have thought of two distinct resolutions. The first option is that I continue providing therapy to my client if they feel they are benefiting from my services and this is what they choose. This would be done in consultation and with professional development and training around approaches which would help this particular client. The second course of action I could take would be to terminate our therapeutic relationship based on my perspective that my client is not benefiting from my services. This would be done with care and sensitivity while supporting my client to access further therapeutic support. There are possible positive and negative consequences of both of these options. In option 1, my client is likely to continue to feel supported and feel that my services are beneficial to them. They would also experience respect for their autonomy over decisions about what is best for them by being given the choice to continue therapy with me. With further professional support and development, as well as more time, there is the chance that my client will begin to see improvements in their major concerns. However, there's also the chance that they will continue to not gain significant therapeutic benefits from our sessions. This could lead to a sense of hopelessness in my client and potential deterioration in their mental health. If my client continues therapy with no major benefit, in the long run, it could come to a point where my client feels that I've exploited them for my financial or professional gain. With option 2, my sensitivity and expressed concern for the long-term well-being of my client, as well as my care to ensure they continue to receive therapeutic supports, could lead to my client feeling supported. If matched with a therapist with the right skills, my client could also experience progress in their self-esteem and relationship challenges, which could lead to improved quality of life and well-being in the long term. However, this option also runs the risk of creating significant hurt for my client and potentially breaking trust, not only with me, but with therapists more broadly. If this were to happen, it could damage their willingness to engage in future therapy with potentially negative long-term consequences for my client. Going through the steps of the ethical decision-making model has helped me to come to the decision to terminate my therapeutic relationship with my client. I feel it is reasonably clear that my client is not benefiting from my services and that continuing therapy poses more risk of harm in the long run than would termination of therapy when done in a sensitive, careful and supportive way. How I will go about enacting my decision will be heavily guided by the code B11, which details ethical practice when terminating psychological services. Key to how I will navigate this ethical dilemma is about how I involve and work with my client through the process. Firstly, I will sensitively explain to my client why I feel it's in their best interest for us to terminate therapy. I will then support my client's autonomy by providing options for ongoing support with alternative therapists who have more specialised skills relevant to their presenting problems and who I trust will be respectful of their gender identity. I will then allow my client to choose which therapist or service they would be open to trying so as to support their autonomy. I would then look for ways to complete a supportive referral to the chosen therapist and continue to support my client until they are able to get alternative support. Finally, I would follow up with my former client to ensure that they are satisfied with their new therapeutic support and offer to help them find another therapist if it was not working for them. I believe this course of action will ensure the least amount of harm and the greatest benefit will come to my client.